Hi everyone, in this good hot afternoon, and we are also eager to talk about the latest hot movie of the week, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So, without ado, I'm going to introduce two of my guests. But before that, um, just a short intro for those who are not familiar with me. I'm Red Dot Diva. I'm a lifestyle and entertainment blogger based in Singapore, and I've been doing, like talking about pop culture for about 11 years or so, maybe more. I can't keep track anymore. Anyway, this live stream started during the COVID, where I thought that there needs to be a voice for Southeast Asian fans and Southeast Asian creators to talk about pop culture and especially highlight uh, Southeast Asian creators like artists, writers, cosplayers, and so that the audience will get to know more of the talents who are residing in our region. Because when you talk about Asian, people think about China, Japan, and Korea, but the Southeast Asian region seems to be quite forgotten. So I thought that this would be a good spotlight, a showcase to showcase their talent to you, and not only that, I also get my friends and some of the pop culture fans along to talk about things that matter to us, and all of these are the movies that we watch. So today we're going to talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse that everybody is talking about on social media right now, and everybody's excited about it. And I want to get the views of my friends, and so that you could join us to discuss about it, or you can watch this later on post live. So for today, I have two of my good friends. One of them is my geek bro, Jedd, and the other is another good friend who's a comic book freak, John. And I'll introduce them one by one. So today, say hello to Jedd. I'll put it on. Yay.
Hello.
Hello, Jedd.
Hello. Hi,
Please
Tina.
introduce yourself first, and John as well. Jedd will introduce himself so that you'll get to know him better.
All
Go
right.
ahead,
Hi,
Jedd.
everyone. Yeah, I'm Jed. I'm Tina's friend. I've known Tina for 10 plus years, and I've known John for 20
Oh
plus
my
years.
gosh.
So we've all been around kind of the geek comic scene a little bit, and I admire Tina a lot because she
Oh,
has
thank you.
operated as an independent agent all this time. Red Dot Diva is a one-person outfit. And in the landscape of media where so much of it, especially in Singapore, your access depends on what association, what organization you're with. It's very difficult to get into the spaces that Tina has been able to get into and cover the things that she has. There are a lot of obstacles, a lot of roadblocks along the way, and I've definitely faced that as my own career has sort of been slowly eroding over the past several years. So Tina has a real job and then this, which is the smart thing to do. So kids, do that. Don't do what I do. I'm a writer. I'm a freelance writer and film critic. I used to be a full-time writer for F Magazine, which was the only movie magazine in Singapore for a long time. And then I wrote for InSync for several years. And now I mainly write for Chris World, which is the in-flight entertainment magazine of Singapore Airlines. I've done a little bit
Nice.
of work for the Emirates magazine as well. Yeah.
And John, introduce
Yeah.
yourself to the audience out there.
Okay. Hi, my name is John. Not so much in the industry as Jet or Tina is, but I'm here to help provide them some context in some of the characters that we see in Marvel or DC. As she said, I'm a very big comic book fan, and
Yep.
I read across all publications, even the indie ones. So just here to help try and guide through this nonsense we call the multiverse that every industry seems to be dipping their toes in.
Yeah, everyone wants a slice of multiverse pie.
Yes,
Yeah, right. But actually,
every studio.
wasn't DC the one that did multiverses earlier than Marvel? Am I right?
Uh, yes, in the Arrow and Flash TV
Flashpoint, right?
series, yeah,
Yeah.
they're the
But then
ones that touch a bit on it
And you're sort
a
of
bit
tracing it
earlier.
back to like Infinite Crisis, Crisis on
Mm.
Infinite Earths, and those
yeah,
events.
Yeah, but with Marvel movies, MCU getting so popular, right? I guess the multiverse is of the MCU is a good starting point for those who are not familiar with comics and the history of comics between the two big names. And this one is really going into all the multiverses, even more than what we see in the actual live action MCU. So before we start, I always like Jedd to give a general synopsis of the movie that we are discussing. So go ahead, Jedd.
Thank you. Okay, let's see how far I can get into this without tripping out on something, because this is a very plot dense film with a lot of characters in it. So this movie is a sequel to Into the Spider-Verse that came out in 2018, and it's set about a year later. So it's a year after the events of that movie, and our main character is Miles Morales, Spider-Man, who is voiced by Shamik Moore. And he is kind of like missing his friend Gwen Stacy, voiced by Haley Steinfeld, who is from another universe, from Earth 65, if I'm not wrong. And he's from Earth 1610. And there is no way for him to kind of reach her. And she suddenly like visits him again. And she is now part of this elite team called the Spider Force. And their job is to go and clean up the mess that was left behind by the ending of the first film, the explosion of the Collider. So that kind of caused ripples across the multiverse and tears across the multiverse that have led to different villains bleeding into different universes. And there's a task force that is sent to go and clean that all up that Gwen is a part of. And the task force is headed up by Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, voiced in this movie by Oscar Isaac. So we first were introduced to him at the ending, the post-credit scene of Into the Spider-Verse, and he's a main character in this one. So he doesn't like Miles. He regards Miles as an anomaly. He feels that Miles should not exist. So the main conflict of the movie is between Miles and Spider-Man 2099, because it is one thing that I really like about the movie is that it is a coming-of-age story, and it's like Miles wants to find his place. And he's being told, no, you don't belong. You shouldn't actually exist. You are an aberration. And we meet other Spider people along the way, including Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, who is voiced by Issa Rae. My favorite character in this movie, and John's as well, Spider-Punk, Toby, who is voiced by Daniel Kaluuya. And then we have Spider-Man India, Parvati Prabhakar, who is voiced by Karan Soni, and a bunch of other characters as well. So you'll notice that we haven't actually brought up a villain, because the main antagonist, I would say, is Spider-Man 2099, even though he's not a villain, but he is in an antagonistic capacity. But the main villain, if we have that designation, is Spot, Dr. Jonathan On, who's voiced in this movie by Jason Schwartzman. And he is like supposed to be kind of a low-tier villain, low-level villain, and he doesn't like everyone to treat him as such. But then gradually he becomes more and more dangerous, and he puts the multiverse in danger. So that is the story of Spider-Man across the Spider-Man.
And reminder, the first half will be spoiler free. We'll try not to spoil anybody watching this live stream later on. And then I'll give you a warning as to when we will start, talking about all that we have watched in the movie theaters. And I think what we considered to be spoilers are stuff that are not in the trailers, or at least mentioned about in articles and so on.
Yeah. Sort of like Act 2 and 3.
I was like reading some of the industry news, and it's like, wow, they were probably expecting Across the Spider-Verse to hit 100 million over the weekend in the US box office, and that's considered like over the top for an animation film, and it has even surpassed its predecessor, Into the Spider-Verse. What they considered good even for animated film is about 90 million, and this is probably gonna hit the roof for that bar. And it's just so fantastic to see an animation film get so much love. Most of the time people have some kind of preconceived notions about animation film being just a cartoon and it's just for kids, but that has been slowly changing in the last maybe 5-10 years, that the animation has really upped their ante. The talent that we have in the pool of the studios that they're getting, and animators are fantastic. Even the directors who appreciate this kind of art form and I'm also talking about stop motion as well. It's really like, there's a lot of love out there, and I feel that maybe hopefully some people will change their minds about animation films, that they are not just Disney kind of films, and then they have adult like themes as well, even though they pitch the story across all age groups. I think there's a lot for an adult to enjoy. um, so maybe my first questions for the two of you, like, did you have any expectations when you went into the theaters to watch this sequel? John?
John, you want to jump in first? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, as you mentioned, in the past decade or so, animation people has been looking at animation previously as a genre, but right now it's moving more into a medium, which it's so exciting. So shows like Arcane, the TV series about League of Legends
Oh
characters,
yes, I love that
and
one. Yeah.
then cyberpunk animation, the Edge Runners as well, uh, all moving along to actually break grounds in the animation in as a medium,
Yeah.
so to speak, and really push that it as a storytelling medium instead of just a genre as a lot of
Yeah.
people see it. And my expectations of Across the Spider Verse actually was based on Into the Spider Verse. I really enjoyed the first show, so I was expecting to see similar to that. Uh, just a really good animating animation movie, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised that it's somehow better than the first movie. They
Yeah.
showed even more polish, which I'm not even sure how that was
Mm.
possible.
Mm.
Um, and unlike the first show where it focused a lot on trying to introduce the concept of the Spider Verse, trying to introduce the different spider characters, and um, this show has, I would say, less action than the first one. Not to say that there's no action, but the focus wasn't so much on action. It was a lot on the characters and the stories that these characters actually have, and that was a really interesting take, and I really enjoyed it
Yeah.
because it helped build the world that we are looking at, help set the stakes. And one thing that I always feared for shows that has a lot of characters in it is how they gonna dedicate the screen time to the different characters. And I think what little that they showed was actually really well written. The characters had enough time to show their motivations. The characters had enough time for you to understand each of the characters. Even the villain. The villain
Yeah.
is something that you can root for, so to speak, even though you don't really want to. He
Yeah.
starts out really goofy, and bit by bit he slowly finds his place as the main antagonist, while all the other characters are also trying to find their spots, trying to find where they actually fit in this whole web of this whole web
It's fair.
for lack of
Yeah.
better word.
Yeah. What about you, Jack? Did you
Yeah,
go
so
in expecting anything?
sort of go back to your point earlier about kind of the preconceived notions about animation. I
Mm,
think
mm,
that this is a movie where it is in two boxes. It's in the animation box and it's in the superhero movie box.
mm.
And these are two, like when you tell people what that is, immediately people have an idea of what that is. And I think it very much transcends that. It like breaks past those
Yeah.
barriers that are forced. And I think that in the past, 10, 20 years, we have seen a lot more of different animation styles influence each other,
Mm, mm.
especially the influence of anime on Western animation and the collaboration between different studios, or
Mm.
uh, studios in the East working on properties in the West, and vice versa. Something like Star Wars Visions is
Yes, I love
fascinating
that.
because the first season is all Japanese studios, and then the second season, like they
Yeah.
open it up, they
Mixed.
have
Yeah.
Artman, yeah, they have the
French studios
studio,
as well.
the Irish studio that did like
Yeah.
Wolfwalkers, and so I think what Spider-Verse does and what Into the Spider-Verse did in 2018 was it very much broke open that limitation where, okay, CG 3D animation means it must look like a DreamWorks movie, or it must look like a Pixar movie, or it must look like a Disney movie like Frozen, or Big Hero 6 or something like that. So they were playing very much with the combination of styles, the interaction of styles, and this movie like ramps it up way more, where you have characters who are visually like completely different than everyone else in the frame, but then after a while you kind of accept it. So it's using that language to emphasize that certain things are not supposed to work together, that this is a character who is like a foreigner in another universe. And I think that is done very well in the opening action sequence where in Earth 65, Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman fights this version of the Vulture, who is from the Italian Renaissance universe. So he looks like a Leonardo da Vinci drawing on brown paper, and he looks like a paper cutout when he moves. So there's stuff like that. So in 2018, I felt like I didn't love Into the Spider-Verse enough, and then something was wrong with me because everyone was telling me this is the greatest movie ever made. Why are you only like a 7 out of 10 on it? Why aren't you a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10? I saw that movie like multiple times to try and like, am I missing something? What am I missing? This movie, I think, improves on that one in every single way. I think it is really, really what a sequel should do, which is you take the pieces of the first one and you're not trying to do it again. You're trying to advance it. So what makes it work is that there's so many elements in it, but they hold so fast and they hold so tight to the focus on the character arcs of Miles and Gwen.
Yes.
Or sort of where both of them are in this Spider-Verse. And both of them as young people finding themselves and their respective home lives. Like earlier in the synopsis, I didn't mention the relationship Miles has with his parents, right? With his dad, who's voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, and his mom, who's voiced by Lauren Luna Velez. And then in this movie, we meet Captain George Stacy, voiced by Shea Wiggum, who is the father of Gwen Stacy. And they go more into her backstory. We saw a little bit of that in Into the Spider-Verse, but in Across the Spider-Verse, they sort of spend more time in Gwen's home universe as well. So I think that is what anchors it, is that there's all of this craziness going on around them, but there is so much like going back to the emotional through line.
Yeah.
So I think like it exceeded my expectations.
Sometimes I'm really afraid to expect from a movie going into a theater because I've watched so many, and then I've watched TV shows as well, and I watched animated TV shows as well, and like I watched so much pop culture that you kind of like know the tropes in your fingertips. You kind of sometimes know what's going to happen, what the person might say. And I loved Into the Spider-Verse a lot. I think I'm one of those that probably Jedd doesn't understand why I liked it so much.
This is a me problem.
But it was the animation, because it was the kind of artwork that I have not seen come to life on screen, in a big screen, in fact, in that kind of vibrancy and color together with the storytelling. That's why I loved Into the Spider-Verse so much. Then we know that there was going to be a trilogy, as that itself is a trope. And then there's going to be a sequel. And I'm always worried about sequels because you do not know what to expect. And sometimes you are just so heavily disappointed, or sometimes you get that weird critically acclaimed, but yet, there's furor about it, like The Last Jedi, which I like, by the way. So you get this kind of mixed reactions from a sequel. And nowadays, with a lot of little teasers and trailers out there, I tell myself that I will probably only watch one of the international trailers and just going blind to a movie theater. So actually, I didn't know who the villain was going to be. So
I'm the same.
Spot was a good review for me because I just didn't go with much expectations.
I saw the toys, so the Spot toys. It's like, okay, all right.
I was so busy that I didn't even go to malls, so I didn't even know what was the toy reviews and like Lego reviews or whatever. So I think that's a great way, I think, to watch movies sometimes, that you don't immerse yourself in all the trailers and all the teasers. I think that takes away some of the joy as well. So when I went there, I was expecting I was kind of afraid to expect. Number one. Number two, I was expecting the animation to be even better because it was like what, 5 years down the road. So there's definitely more, like people gathering together with their what you learn from the previous experience. That is always the case, and I'm sure there were improvements in their artistry as well as how they use technology. And then number three, I was expecting actually more Gwens. So I was happy that there was more Spider-Gwen. Um, because as you know, I'm just not talking about token diversity, but I think that women's stories need to come up to the forefront a lot more. And she represented the kind of like getting into womanhood. She's in the middle of teenage and young woman. So that was a great point for her to like talk about the family aspect. I really like them going back to her home world and finding out more about her family. The animation at that point, right, about her, I kind of sense, as you said, Jedd, I like what you said, that they were using it as a language. The soundtrack as well, together with the animation, they were both an audio visual language. So during Gwen's story, you could see that when she was depressed, right, and unsure of where she stood in her world with her dad, the stories were like, the colors were like dark green, bluish, right? And then
They
after
use the
that,
color theory so
yeah,
well.
the color changes together with the mood and the themes. I thought that was really nice as well, because even though if you are maybe not paying attention or impaired in some way, you are still able to appreciate the story that is being presented to you on screen as well. Um, so I know we talk about like a lot that we liked, but maybe name some of the big three things that you like about the movie. I think it's pretty clear to people listening that we just absolutely loved Across the Spider-Verse. But maybe three main things. Jedd?
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up on some of the stuff that you said about how you've seen so much across all of these mediums that you just feel like I know what I'm going to expect. And I think one thing that I really love is I love like meta stuff, I love deconstructionist stuff, but it's very tricky when you do that because you don't want to come off as like smug and too
Yeah,
self-satisfied
correct.
and
Yeah,
I'm smarter
yeah,
than the audience. But
yeah,
at the same time, I think like I really like this movie's meta elements, where this movie is unpacking the structure of a Spider-Man story and is using the language of storytelling. Like there's something in the movie where the Spider Force refers to canon events. So they're talking about things like the way we talk about these
yeah,
stories. And the familiarity with the basic Spider-Man story is something that they build upon, where you expect in a Spider-Man story, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then in this movie, it turns out that those events are immutable. They have to happen. So the tension in the movie is Miles saying, how can someone else have already written my story? So I think that is a very
mm,
relatable frustration that a lot of young people have when you come into the world and when someone tells you that's just the way things work, you cannot do anything about it. Your instinct is to question why, maybe
yeah,
out of naivete or idealism or hope or something. And is that necessarily a good thing? Is it necessarily a bad thing? And that's something that they go into here. And another thing I really like about this movie is we talk about how now everything is all very IP driven. That every big movie or TV show is trying to make you do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the
yeah.
screen meme. One time in Hollywood, there's a lot of that. So I didn't see the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah,
John saw it, but that was a criticism of that, where people were saying it functions like it does what it's supposed to do, but it is just sort of coasting by on the nostalgia of the pointing at the screen factor. So definitely, there's a lot of that in this movie because we're doing a lot of deep cut references and background gags, and there are 240 separate Spider-Man shot in this film. But that's not the focus. That's not what the story is about. The story is not about you recognizing which Spider-Man it is and nudging your friend and like, yeah, that's one part of it. But the emotional anchor is so much more important and takes so much precedence over that. So I really like that about this movie. And I think so those are two things. So I guess the third thing that I like is that I feel it does the middle installment job very well. because a
Yeah.
lot of times when you have the burden of being a middle installment
Yeah.
where you feel like I don't have a beginning and I don't have an end, but it builds upon a lot of the stuff in
Yeah.
the first one very well. It leads, of course, there's a cliffhanger ending into a third one, but I didn't feel like you cheated me out of a movie, which
Correct.
sometimes you feel with a middle installment. So certainly there are people who will disagree with me. There are people who will say nothing really happens in the movie. You end the movie just before something is about to happen. I saw a comment like that already on the Sony page. But
Yeah.
I disagree with that. I think that the stuff that happens in this movie advances the plot, advances the characters, and also kind of builds intrigue in the third one. And what what John was saying earlier about how there is less action in this than in Into the Spider-Verse. That's true. But at the same time, I do admire that they dare to spend time with the characters. They dare
Correct.
to have kind of long dialogue scenes. And there's a
Mm.
very beautiful scene where an acquaintance of mine noticed that it's set outside, like at sunset. There's a barbecue on the rooftop, and it's an interaction between Miles and his parents, and you see the sunlight change. You see the light change in real time as the sun sets. So that's a very kind of lyrical, poetic scene versus the very frenetic action that you also have. And the movie does both of those things very, very well.
Yeah. Okay, before we go to John, Mark is here. It's like, hello, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Listening to us, and you'll be seeing the movie tomorrow. I hope you will enjoy it as much as we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a great time.
Yeah. Yes, John, your turn. 3 things that you like about Across the
Yeah,
Spider-Verse.
to expand a bit on what Jedd has said, there's something that I think it's maybe only very clear to comic readers is talking about the canon events, is that comic readers has this very very strange relationship where they are very protective of the canon of the world, but they're also very frustrated with a lot of things because of the canon of the world, in which Peter Parker and all the Spider people, they unfortunately go through really, really horrific events, and they don't seem to ever get a happy ending or a happy ending that actually sticks for them. And one thing this show actually really does play a lot with Mouse is that Mouse is questioning why do we need to accept that, and there's a first time for everything. Maybe I can have a happy ending, and it feels like it's a letter written to fans of the comics that says, hey, maybe it's possible. Maybe the canon is not so immutable as what everybody thinks it is, and it's very nice to see that, like, little glimmers of hope being portrayed in the first movie and this movie as well, where Miles Morales' character it's like that, the anomaly where he has a happy family and his life is not completely
Yeah.
tragic as Peter Parker, as Gwen Stacy, even Mary Jane. He doesn't have he has a good life, which also is referenced in the movie where Spider Punk does make reference to him, his life being slightly different from the norm. And I really like that as someone who's I've been telling Jedd and Tina that in Spider Comics recently, everybody's just really frustrated with how the direction that is going. So to see something like this that says, like, they're challenging the canon, it's very nice to see. And uh, the other 2 things that I really like about the movie, it's how it looks like a painting, but it's also very chaotic because they combine every kind of art style and every animation style into one sequence, and you can see it's just like just this mess, but it looks beautiful and it looks messy at the same time.
It's a beautiful mess.
It's a beautiful mess, and there's this one sequence which they did show where it's Gwen and Miles sitting upside down
Oh,
with the
yeah.
city in the backdrop,
I
and
like that
that
scene.
was
Yeah.
such an incredible scene. So the art style in this show, art direction is really, really really, really nice. And the last thing that I would say I like about this movie is that Jed has also mentioned this. The references are there, but the references are not the main thing.
Mm.
Half the time you're watching the show, you're not paying attention to the references. The references jumps out, like pops up, and you have that 1 second of like, hey,
Yeah.
that's cool, and then you quickly focus back onto the story, because the story is so well written that that is the main thing. And I think a lot of movies these days tend to forget to write a good story. They
Mm.
are so uh, concerned with fan service that
Mm.
they forget that fans want a good story before they want all these
Yeah.
references. The
Yeah.
references are only there to enhance the movie, not to be the main focus of the movie. To
Mm.
reference the Mario movie, I'm in sort of a minority. I think it's an okay movie. There's a lot of things I like about it, but it's just one big reference page
Fan
where you're
service.
looking through like ha.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's things like this, and I think the balance is really done really well in this movie. Like props to
Mm.
the directors, props to
Yeah.
animator directors. I can't even imagine
Yeah.
how do they have a workflow
Yeah.
to work
I
this
mean,
out.
they work with what, about 1,000 over animators across
Yeah,
many
Yeah.
studios, and it's amazing. I think kudos to the animation directors and the writer and directors themselves, which is the people that we love from the Lego Movie, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, as well as writing credit for David Callahan. Um, the writing itself was the one that wowed me, as John says, the storytelling, because without the storytelling, the background color and movement and music means very little. Um, I did find the first part a little slow, but then it was like they gave each character enough time to breathe and to express about their emotions and feelings. Um, I did think it was a bit slow, but then upon hindsight, after the second half of the movie, right, I kind of like reverse appreciated because I then realized that there were a lot in front that gave me the feelings that I felt when I watched the second half. So in all of that, I didn't feel that the movie was too long. Sometimes when it goes over 2 hours, you kind of like, cringe a little and say, better go toilet first. But this one really went on smoothly. I did they managed to like craft the emotional points very well throughout the movie. Someone said well balanced. Yes, I think it's really well balanced. Um, you then after that you start to appreciate the story points that came along, like family, like where you belong, and then like especially in Singapore where people are brought up to go this particular trajectory in life, right? It's like, do is this the way that my life story is going to be told? I think these are such important and universal points to even ask ourselves these questions when we watch the movie later. I think it did make me wonder as well, and ask about where I am in this world. Uh, the other point I like was, like I mentioned, the diversity inclusion thing. In many movies these days, this is such a hot topic that they tend to be token diversity. I feel I can't really explain to you how you feel that way, but when you watch the thing, you kind of know, like, yeah, they just added this person in just to add some. But over here, right, the story is so well balanced as well, and the characters are so well balanced as well that you don't even notice like the race, the gender, or whatever it is. They just form a very good story. And you just look at it as like the real world is, where we have women, we have different races, and we have different people who speak differently from different worlds, and you don't feel that it was token representation in this movie. I think that is very rare, and I think I should give kudos to the team as well for that. That you didn't feel that it was just hackneyed, kind of like, I put this together just to make you feel good. The other thing was like the world building. Just look at Mountbatten, right? Mountbatten or whatever for Spider-Man India. It was just fantastic. Okay, when you look at the world that they create, where each Earth has their different styles as well for the animation, that takes a lot of creativity. That you didn't feel as if like, oh, I've seen this before. This one looks very like tropish. But again, it was like really wonderful. The music, I think I can't divorce the animation with the music. It kind of went together so well, and so well edited as well, that I really like that about this movie. I think I hit 3 points. The other one, maybe the last one, will be the villain. I have complained to Jedd many times before that I find that Marvel villains are kind of deficient against DC's villains. They just didn't seem to have enough motivation and growth as to why they decide to be so evil. And this one is the one that I felt like, there was a really good background story, his origin story, which was amusing and gets sad, and how he became like so-called people laughing at him, like a low-level villain that doesn't even know why he's a villain, why is he doing here with his powers, to someone that is really the linchpin of all the things that's going to be happening for this movie and the next one. So I love villains. So that's one of the things that stood out for me as well. Um, and then I'll come to my next question. What's your favorite character in this movie? Like favorite.
I mean,
Jedd.
as Jedd has mentioned earlier, it is Spider-Punk, played by
We're both
David
in
Kaluuya.
agreement on this. I think it's so much fun that they went and they cast Daniel Kaluuya, who is from the same place in England, from Camden, that the character is from, and the sort of infusion of the Black British culture. Like you were saying about the diversity in this film, I think what happens is one of the themes of the movie is how you have this like common Spider-Man story that reverberates throughout the multiverse. And so you can have many, many different iterations of that and many different manifestations of that. But then they want to also root it in a certain cultural specificity. And so for Miles, like his thing is you have the graffiti, that he did with his uncle in the first movie, and you have the hip hop, and you have like the art and the pop culture that he likes, and the result of him being in an Afro-Caribbean Afro-Latino like upbringing. His mom being
Mixed race as well.
And so like his mom just casually speaking Spanish and things like that. So I remember I have a friend, Jerry, and she went many years ago to an animation convention, to an event, and they were screening, like Phil Lord and Chris Miller were there doing a panel, and they screened like the first 20 minutes of Spider-Verse. And she said that there was a girl sitting next to her who like burst into tears when she heard Miles' mom speaking in Spanish, because it's like, that is such a normal thing in this movie. That they didn't feel the need to like put a big exclamation point on it. It's just like a part of where he's from, and I think they do that for Hobie, for Spider-Punk, and I think like a lot of times we see a lot of the punk aesthetic without people are scared to talk about the punk politics, but you can't really separate it. And in this movie, especially for a family movie, a children's movie, there's some references to sort of like underlying punk beliefs and things like that. And obviously, it doesn't go very deep into it, but it nods towards. Yeah, so in the comics, like this Spider-Man killed the president in that universe, like assassinated the president. So
totalitarian world, right?
Yeah, so it's fun because they are not afraid to like acknowledge kind of the roots of the character and where he's from. Like John will go into a little bit more detail about that. And also I think with Spider-Man India, with Parvati Prabhakar, like you're talking about Mumbattan and the design of it and the idea of like mashing up Mumbai and Manhattan, that are both very chaotic cities by themselves, very iconic cities, and cities that have a very distinct identity, and sort of mash them up, and there's a lot of fun to be had. And that was the first kind of multiverse Spider-Man that I was familiar with, because as a kid I remember reading Spider-Man India that was published by Gotham Comics, and Gotham Comics was based in India, and they licensed like from DC and Marvel. So as a kid, like I read Hush in that format, in the A5, I brought that to school. I borrowed it from my friend who was subscribed to Gotham Comics. So it is, they redesigned him. He has a different design in the comic. The comic is just like Spider-Man top half, dhoti kind of bottom half. And then this one is a lot more colorful. His hair is out and everything.
Right.
So I think like the idea of like that little bit of cultural specificity, he goes on this great rant about people saying
chai.
And there's stuff like that where it feels like it doesn't, like you were saying, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like, oh, this is a part of each of the characters, like
Yeah.
makeup and their world. And I mean, even a character like Miguel O'Hara, he is half Mexican and half Irish. Like you see that in his name. And they
Yeah.
cast like Oscar Isaac for it. And at the same time, they're not making a big deal out of it. It is just like that's who we like.
Exactly.
The idea is that one story can manifest to different people in different contexts. So I'm gonna throw it over to John, because I always say that John is the person whom after every comic book movie I go and ask him, like, did this happen in the comics? Where's this from? Is the cat in the comics? What did it change? So John can come and give us a bit more background on the characters, while also talking about the characters in this movie that he liked.
Yeah. Talking about Hobie Hobart Brown, Spider-Punk character. One interesting fun fact that not many people know, that this character is actually the original Prowler in the comics in Earth 616, and this was the character that took the mantle of Prowler. And it's very interesting that he was Spider-Punk in the different Earth, and it's very interesting to see how did they work with this character, especially his art style, so frantic and crazy. One thing I really like is reading about Daniel Kaluuya when he was talking about how he found the voice of the character.
Yeah.
Because the character doesn't necessarily speak that way in the comics. He does use a bit of slang, but not to the extent that they did it in the movies. And one thing Daniel said was that because the multiverse is such an amalgamation of everything, he wanted to make it sound as close to what he would have been saying in Camden, because he grew up there.
Yeah.
But he also wanted
he grew up there.
and he also wanted to include certain little things like Cockney rhyming slang, which included in there, which is pretty fun. And another thing that he did, right, was to look up Spider-Punk playlist on Spotify, which I'll admit I didn't know existed until
I'm gonna look this up now.
and that's so interesting, because he said that he wants to see what are fans' interpretation of the characters, and one way to see it is through music, because music is really an expression, and that's really, really nice to see, like, how much effort and how much care he did to put into a character, which didn't end up having a lot of screen time as much as I wanted, but really, really did super well in each of the scenes that he does appear in. And as Jedd has said, in his universe, he actually kills the president. And one thing to note is that in his universe, the president is Osborn. It's President
Norman
Osborn.
Osborn,
Yeah, Norman Osborn. And he gets the powers because Hobie gets the powers because he's bitten by a spider that was caused to become radioactive because of President Osborn's dumping of radioactive
Nuclear
waste.
waste,
Yes. And so there's a lot of that political, where it's environmental issues. There's the whole government being controlling, the media being controlled. And he teams up with a person called Captain Anarchy, which is the multiverse version of Captain America, which is quite fun. Hopefully we get to see that maybe somewhere along the line.
Along the line. I mean, me too. He was my favorite character, a new character in this movie. And for the time that he had, right, he really kind of, like, he was so memorable. Like his lines and the way they animated him and what he did to progress the story along as well, which is actually spoiler, so I won't mention what he did. But the whole drawing of the Spider-Punk was very memorable. Of course, my favorite is still Peter B. Parker, and And this time around, he has his little baby with him. He's a daddy, and
Yeah,
it's just
I felt like that is probably the cheap move is to have a cute baby in
it's
an
like a
animated
cute baby,
movie.
like
Yeah,
a baby
Mayday is
Yoda. Just throw
adorable.
on there.
it absolutely works. It works. It
Actually
works
works,
on me. Yeah,
Work
she
with
is
me.
so cute. Mayday is so cute in this movie. Yeah.
It's so cute. Yeah, I think running along, Peter P. Parker will be my favorite character of all the animated Spider-Verse movies. But Spider-Punk for this one was really memorable. I do agree. I think he's a standout character that they have designed, and the dialogue that they have given to him is meaningful as well. I think we have come with like a 45-minute break, and I think it's time now that we can actually get into spoilers because
Yes. Let's do
Spicier
it.
discussion.
Yeah.
I'll give a warning. We will be
Yeah.
talking about spoilers now. So if you want
And the
to,
video will remain up, so you can
and the
come back
video will
and
remain up.
revisit
So
it.
this is
Yeah.
the point where you can either move on to another video or you want to continue listening to us. And spoilers. Now, there were so many cameos and interesting things, right, that appeared on screen, although they didn't detract from the actual movie at all. The one that made me kind of like laugh internally was one of the in the beginning of the movie where during the fight, right, the Jeff Koons balloon dog fell
Yeah.
and broke into pieces. Now,
Yes.
this story, right, about the actual balloon dog that was broken into pieces somewhere in Miami, right, happened in February 2023, And
Yes,
this
it's
movie has
very
been going a
recent.
lot animated,
So that's like
there
a
have been
coincidence.
yeah, well, I was like, did you all go into another
Yeah.
people's in order to find out that this thing actually happened?
Did they change the scene
Yeah,
on the spot?
or you wrote the story and therefore this thing happened in Miami.
you
Mind blown.
manifested it, and
Yeah.
and there's a great bit where, of course, like the Renaissance voucher is like you call this art, so
Sure, yeah.
the whole fight is in the Guggenheim Museum. Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
Yeah, that's very smart. I mean, as you said, like the cameos and the references were smart references. They were not just hackneyed and dumb, copy paste.
And
in
they
here and
they
there.
called back to the Banksy joke from the first movie.
Yeah,
That's a
Banksy, yes.
Banksy. Yeah. Which in the first
And
movie,
then-
the person who says that is Post Malone. So I don't know whether or not he came back to do the voice again for this.
And then, did you notice the approved by the comic code authority?
Yeah, which
Yes.
is how the first movie began as well.
Yeah,
And there's a
that's right.
whole history about the Comics Code Authority and kind of that like self-censorship embodying.
Yeah,
It's like
self-censorship.
parallels to
how
the
times
East Coast
have
in
changed.
Hollywood. Yeah.
How times have changed, but it seems to be going back now in Florida. Everything's
Yeah.
being censored now. Right. I think it's okay this now to even talk about that the cameo, right? That everybody's kind of like talking about for those who are into spoilers. Jedd, do you know the history about our favorite cameo, the one that then Donald Glover, Prowler?
Yeah. Okay. So this is fun, right? So Donald Glover, he cameos in this movie as live action Prowler from the MCU. So we saw him as Aaron Davis, but not in the Prowler costume in Spider-Man: Homecoming. And there is a deleted scene where after Spider-Man has stuck his hand to the hood of the car, he's on the phone and he says he's calling Miles and he addresses Miles on the
his
phone.
nephew, right?
So Miles exists in the MCU.
Yes.
We just haven't met him yet. We've seen him. So he has been linked to like the Spider-Man role because he voiced Miles in the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series, and also there was a campaign to get him to be cast in the Amazing Spider-Man, and that the role eventually went to Andrew Garfield. And part of the fun that the community had with it is they had a scene of him waking up wearing Spider-Man pajamas in the TV show Community as a reference to that. And then into the Spider-Verse, there is on a TV that scene. They animated that scene from Community of Donald Glover waking up wearing the Spider-Man pajamas in the same in Uncle Aaron's house. So in one frame you have two Prowlers in that first movie. So this builds upon that by actually having him physically appear. And I think they were much more daring in this one by combining live action and animation. Because earlier in the movie also Spot visits the Venom universe and says,
Oh, right. I like that one,
the
right?
convenience store owner,
Mrs.
played by
Chen.
Peggy Lou, Mrs. Chen, yeah, and I that is so great. And then I really love the Lego universe bit.
Oh, no. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
It's
I
where
love
to
they-
Legos.
scale.
I love Lego
And then like
universe.
when Peter Parker changes, it goes shoop, like they do their own sound effects, yeah. And they had J.K. Simmons come back to voice the Lego J. Jonah Jameson as well.
I love that
And when they all show up, like the Lego Spider-Man is small, like
Yeah.
he is small relative to everybody else
Yeah.
in a scale, and I think like they put so much effort into the different universes and different environments, because for Into the Spider-Verse, most of it was really spent in Miles's home universe, and it was these other visitors coming in, and in this one they go to the other universes, including the Spider-Man 2099 universe in Nueva York, where that is the home base of Miguel of Spider-Man 2099. So they were putting so much personality into those environments as well, and then the cameos, like they were much more daring with the incongruousness of the art style, to the extent of incorporating live action, where you see like archival clips from the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and from The Amazing Spider-Man, because they're referencing the death of Uncle Ben, and they're also referencing the death of George Stacy, who was played by Dennis Leary.
I think that actually connects all the Spider-Man movies together, and also the MCU versus the Sony Pictures Spider-Man as well, and then you start to see the whole entire thing not just siloed in their own IPs, but in the whole kind of like landscape of stuff happening. So then I don't know whether you did think about this, but the first thought that came to me was like, where does the Time Variance Authority stand then? John, do you have any inkling?
Okay, so this is always the tricky case when they touch on that end of the multiverse, and then actual multiverse of them traveling around. And early on in the movie, Miles also references the nerd from 1999, the Earth 199999, which was the original MCU universe designation.
Right. The MCU universe,
But after the events of I think multiverse, Doctor Strange, I think I do believe it's considered as 616 right now, which is the canon world in the Marvel comics. So there's a lot of mixing about here and there, where in 616 in the comic universe, the TVA doesn't necessarily exist yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
So it's very confusing.
And in the Spider-Verse movies, Peter B. Parker is from 616.
Yes, correct.
So the default world, or the sort of like prime world in those movies, is the world that he comes from with Mary Jane and Mayday.
The one that we are familiar with. Yeah.
So and I think like they are trying to say like this is a Spider-Man world. So there are not other Marvel kind of characters, which is a tricky thing, because this, it's like who has the rights to what, and this is also the Sony thing, right? Like Sony cannot touch some other characters. So that is why it is like a Spider-Verse rather than a general Marvel multiverse. But I also like that, because I think one thing that these movies speak to very much is like, why is the Spider-Man story so resonant? Why is Spider-Man as a character so popular and iconic? Why does everyone know the story? No matter who you are, whether you're a little kid or you're an old person, like everybody knows, oh, Peter Parker, Uncle Ben died, Aunt May, Green Goblin. Everyone knows those parts of the story. So what this is having fun with is sort of like saying, when we take it apart, when we blow up the story, what are those individual parts? And the tension in this movie is like those things have to happen in that order. And so a spoiler is that there is a scene in this movie when they go to Mumbattan, and Miles saves Captain Singh. So he saves the George Stacy of that world, who is the father of Gayatri, who is the Gwen of that world. And that's not supposed to happen. So that makes Miguel angry. And Miles, like his mantra in the whole movie is that I can do both. Spider-Man can do both.
Yeah.
But they're trying to say, no, you have to make a choice. You have to sacrifice, like the people whom you love, because that is the thing that has to happen in your
Yeah.
story.
Or
And
the
then
whole
that
world.
upsets Miles
Yeah.
because like, who are you to decide who lives or dies? So I think that is very interesting, that kind of like element of like what John was saying earlier, the immutability of canon.
Yeah, the
And
challenging
if
of the
you
canon,
like,
right? Which
like
is what.
the Jenga block, right? If you pull out one piece, what happens
correct.
after that?
Yeah,
And then Miguel's own motivation is that he tried to disrupt the canon himself. He tried to take the place of a Miguel who died, and that had like disastrous consequences because he went to a universe where there was there was a Miguel who has a wife and who has a kid, and he took the place of that character, and he wasn't supposed to. So after that, that is what made him like dedicate himself to keeping the order in the Spider-Verse.
yeah. The only Spider-Man without a sense of humor.
Yeah, no Spider-Man who doesn't make jokes.
That scene where Peter B. Parker is basically a new dad showing everybody his baby photos.
Oh,
And this is,
Everybody
why are you
knows.
showing me the photos? She's right here.
No, and Miguel standing so stiff with
yeah.
Mayday climbing over him is such a fun
So funny,
fun
right?
And
sequence.
because you also remember that he lost his own daughter.
Yeah.
he
So
lost
that's
his
that's
own
the other that's the other layer to it. Yeah, I love Mayday's little beanie. Like she pulls the mask down over her face. She has a little Spider-Man beanie.
That's one thing the movie does really well, is to show the motivations of every character, even the
correct.
antagonist. You understand where they're coming from,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
I
yeah, I
think
wanted
Marvel
to-
hasn't done very well with
Correct.
the motivations of
Yeah.
their villains or their
Correct.
antagonists.
And I guess this kind of could be considered a spoiler, but there's a reveal that you did see Spot in the first movie. You saw Jonathan on before he transformed. He was the guy who got hit in the head by a bagel when they were running out of Alchemax, and he tossed a bagel, and then the sound effects it bagel. So and I thought that was very funny because a lot of movies have done this kind of like retcon thing of the villain was actually in the first movie all along. You just didn't see him. Most hilariously, like recently in Fast X, they were trying to say that Jason Momoa was there the whole time in Fast Five. You just moved the camera to the left. Jason Momoa was standing there, and you didn't see him. So they kind of do that a bit, where they were saying that Jonathan On was a colleague of Doctor Octopus from the first movie, right? And that he was there the whole time, and he got mutated because of the collider explosion at the end. And so he has this kind of like tragic backstory, but also everyone treats him as a joke. And there's a really good introductory scene where he's trying to do a heist on an ATM in the convenience store, but he's too incompetent to do it because he doesn't know how the spots work. And eventually he figures out that he has the power to go across the multiverses, which like threatens the multiverse. And I think I was telling John that the treatment of the character reminds me a bit of the treatment of Polka Dot Man. It's sort of similar powers, similar like butt of the joke for many years thing, but then they are both like kind of very empathetic, and there's a tragic dimension to them.
And they're both incredibly powerful.
Actually,
in their own right.
So,
I really like how they did the visual change of his personality. Is that his skin turns
slouching,
black,
slouchy,
and then the spots become white instead of
the whole
originally where
animation
it's
concerning Spot itself
black
as well. The fight and the actions and all that just wows me away. You know how
and like you see like the rough sketches, like there's like the ball and socket thing. Like they are not afraid to leave it like quote unquote imperfect, because like that is part of the style, So the Spot stuff was the fight. There's a fight, like there's a scene where Miles's parents are meeting the school guidance counselor, who's voiced by Rachel Dratch, and he's supposed to be there, but he is late because he's fighting Spot.
Fighting Spot.
And there's a whole like entangled up in the power lines and all of that. Yeah. And that is like a really great sequence. And they're using the language of the tropey language of calling him a villain of the week, right? Like disposable, lower tier villain, and he's insulted by that. And that becomes part of his motivation. Like, I am more than just a villain of the week.
Yeah.
So the characters are speaking the language that we as fans are speaking.
Yeah. I know. There's so many things to love about this movie, right? Is there anything that you don't like?
Okay, I would say maybe how it ended. I was telling Jedd when I started hearing the music, I'm just like, it's gonna end.
I think that's my main point as well. But there are most middle movies end in some sort of
Yeah,
cliffhanger.
I accepted that this is the Empire Strikes Back. This is our
I
kind
would
of
have
middle
preferred
movie,
it end without her, without showing her getting a team. I prefer it
Oh
end
yeah,
of
okay,
her
okay, yeah.
just living and
Yeah,
trying to figure out what to do.
yeah.
And at that
Yeah.
sequence,
I guess maybe they thought that they wanted to end it in a more hopeful note, yeah, rather than
yes,
leave it
yes.
so depressing, I guess. After all, it's for kids also. So
Yeah,
they didn't want to leave it so sad and uncertain. Um, yeah, but I mean that's what I think. And I did feel a bit more hopeful to see the old team and the new coming together with Spider-Man India and Spider-Bite as well,
Spider-Man, yeah.
joining them to save, or rather try to get along with Miles' end of his story and save his dad from Spot. So that was a really interesting way to end, though. As I said, I went in blind, so I didn't expect much from where the story was going to take me. It was quite a surprise that they went there with the canon kind of discussion, and then also about him being ending up in the different Earth.
I really like that. I like how they
Yeah,
set it up.
I like.
So
Yes.
they were very clever about that because there's a
Yeah, there
device.
I didn't expect that, because yeah, oh yeah, it makes sense, right? Because the spider was from Earth
No,
47, so he went
and
there.
and they do show you when he gets scanned. They do show you Earth 42,
Yeah,
but it's
Yeah,
very brief.
yeah,
So
yeah,
not many
yeah.
people might have noticed it. It
And
flashes
they
very quickly.
when they explain how the go home machine works, they're like it scans your DNA, but what it's
yeah,
scanning is it's scanning for the spider.
correct.
So
Yeah,
Yes.
why part of why Miguel doesn't like Miles' like existence is that Miles is bitten by a spider from the wrong dimension. That
wrong
is
Earth.
what
Yeah,
happened into the Spider-Verse. So that means that that spider was supposed to bite someone,
Peter
Peter
Parker or
Parker,
someone.
from
Yeah,
that Earth, and that just never happened. So at the end of the movie, you get to see like what the consequence of that is, and in this like, kind of like dark like mirror universe world, it was Jeff. It was the father of Miles who died, and Aaron Davis lives,
yeah,
but Aaron Davis is not the Prowler.
yep.
Miles is the
Miles
Prowler.
is
So that is the big like kind
evil
of
Miles.
big, yeah. So it's like Miles facing off against his like kind of dark reflection, and that is a theme in all the Spider-Man kind of stories. Like you have the black suit and you have Venom and stuff like that. So like the kind of your greatest battle lying within thing. This is a new like kind of spin on that. By setting up the conflict that the main villain of the third one,
Yeah,
or at least the first part of the
I
third
think
one,
that's also
will.
one of my favorite parts of the movie. That reveal. Yeah, because it gave me so much like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, I got so aggravated.
And because like and it's so smart, right? Because we spent so long, we spent two movies knowing this Miles.
Yeah,
So then this is the opposite, right? This
yeah,
is how, and I mean the appeal of a lot of these multiverse stories is the idea of that joke of time traveler moves chair 1 inch and then everything turns out differently. And it's
wow,
kind of like in Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Daniel Kwan, who's one of the two directors, he said that he views it as a metaphor for being an immigrant, because for immigrant families and immigrants, you're always thinking of like that one choice changed my life. What if I didn't choose that? What if I
yeah,
made a different choice than to uproot my entire life and move my family to another country? And that was a metaphor for sort of like viewing that through the lens of the multiverse is a science fiction device. So in that same way, it is like what would lead to Miles becoming a bad guy,
yeah,
because we
yeah,
already know this Miles, and it's like Miles can't be a bad guy. We know
yeah,
him. We know Miles. Like what has to happen for that turn of events to take place? And I really really love that. That is kind of the big reveal. And I mean, I didn't know this. I didn't know Mahershala Ali was coming back to voice Aaron Davis. I didn't know that it was going to end in Earth 42, and I thought that was a so I guess a complaint that I have is that the ending itself is so long. It's sort of like
mm,
15-20 minutes when you already
yeah,
know the 42 thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
So after
yeah,
that, there's still like a bit that goes on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
I would have liked it to end with them just like
Correct.
landing in Earth
I
42.
prefer it to
Yeah.
end with like a snap cliffhanger, like a something more wow, whereas it kind of
Yeah.
tapers off. So you didn't feel as you
because
don't
there
feel
was
that
like
kind of
a bit
suspense.
too
Yeah,
long that they spent
yeah,
with that
yeah.
Miles and that Aaron. Yeah,
Okay, we're just gonna about
Uh,
wrapping up, but before that, I have kind of like two fun questions.
yeah.
I do have two things that
Okay,
I want
sure,
to talk
sure.
about also.
Go ahead.
So there are a lot of spider characters that are being introduced to us. Three that I want to shout out. The one that appears and says, "There's nowhere to run, Spider-Man. Like stop, give up, Mouse. There's nowhere to run." He's voiced by the particular person. He's a DJ
Mm.
who's actually involved in the music or the soundtrack
Oh, okay.
of this movie, which I thought was pretty cool. They got the DJ to do the voice. And the other two characters, one you have mentioned, Spider Bite. She's okay. She's a really minor character in the comics, but one really interesting thing is that she's not actually bitten by a spider. She's a spider character that's not like all the other spider persons, because in her world, the virtual reality has taken over where everybody lives most of
It's
their
like a
life.
Ready Player One kind
Mm.
of world.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mm.
something like Ready Player One, and so she becomes the spider avatar in that
Mm.
world to
Mm.
protect the virtual reality world.
Mm.
And I like that they made her in charge of the technology
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
that makes
She's
sense.
voiced by Amandla Stenberg, whom we
yeah.
will soon be seeing in
And
Star Wars Acolyte.
the voice actors are fantastic.
Yeah.
Those that we are familiar
Casting is
with,
very, very good.
like Oscar Isaac, and Haley Steinfeld. I love her. I love her work. She's a super talented young lady.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other character that I want to give a shout out to was Sun Spider, the Spider Man, the Spider Woman in the wheelchair, the
okay,
disabled
yes, yes.
spider person, because she was created by a fan after the Into the Spider Verse movie. Marvel Comics had a contest for fans to create spider sonas, and this character was created by a fan, where her web slingers are the crutches, and it was so nice to see them animate this character into
Mm,
the movie.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool tidbit. Thanks for sharing that, John.
yeah,
Now,
no,
my,
no
my fun
worries.
questions is, what do you think a Singapore Spider-Man would look like, and what kind of like special powers he might have?
Ooh, I do have an idea on
Would he
this.
come from Yishun?
Maybe Jet, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think like we're expecting a joke answer, but really like it's just a very depressing kind of answer. Because I think like Singapore, we're not supposed to have hopes and dreams. So we're not supposed to. We're also not supposed to help other people, because that means that you have to look out for yourself, so you cannot look out for other people. So I think that already means that it's very difficult to have people who like that the superhero concept. Of course, there are people, and I'm saying generally lah. There are people in Singapore who help other people, but I think that the landscape of Singapore is such that anything out of the ordinary gets squashed,
Mm,
gets
that
stamped
is
on,
true.
and gets removed from existence. So I don't think there is a space for Singapore Spider-Man. I think like the spider would get depressed and not bite anybody and die. So that
Turn up.
yeah, it just like it wouldn't happen, because it is too much of a shift from the status quo. So yeah, I think that I feel like just like we cannot have so many things, because there is this prevailing like kind of order and regimentation and rigidity. So that just wouldn't happen. That's you wanted a funny answer. I'm sorry.
No, I
Give
mean
you a
it's
sad
real
answer.
to life, but I think that's true. But which is why Singapore superhero stories don't really take off, no matter how
Yeah,
hard people want to try over here.
yeah.
It just
We
doesn't,
know
because it's
people
not
who
in our
try. Yeah,
psyche. Yeah, we don't hero worship in that way, in a sense. Also,
no.
I think it's not our fantasy.
I once wrote a story where the idea was it was a genetic experimentation, And the
Yeah.
spoiler is that you're thinking that it is like you're making an X-23 or something. They're making
Yeah.
a super scholar.
Yeah.
They're doing like
Correct.
eugenics and trying to make a kid with a big brain, which is what Singapore would do, I feel. So that is sort of my kind of depressing Singapore superhero character story. Yeah.
But who knows? It may change. We don't understand the Gen Z right now, but they seem to be breaking some walls. And as much as I don't understand them and don't agree with all of them, but they do break certain walls. It might take some time, but who knows? I'm just not.
Yeah, for as long as buskers need to renew their license every year by doing an audition in front of people who don't understand what busking is, for as long as that happens, I feel like we're gonna be stuck for a little while.
Well, the thing is that because you are stuck with this this authority that we have right now, then again, there is a whole political discussion whether that is a good or bad.
So
We also
I will
wouldn't
not
know,
open
right?
that kind of
Yeah,
worms. I will pass it over to John.
the problem,
John, say
the
something
problem
less
with
interesting.
where we live here is also an unique anomaly, I should say. We are an anomaly in a sense. So maybe we are all spider people because we are an anomaly in Anomaly Island.
Yes, yeah.
The way that we actually survive is already an unusual thing.
Right, yeah.
For me, for this question, right? For me, I would say, in terms of design, I can't think of one because we do have a tarantula that it's native to Singapore, and
Wow.
it's called the Singapore Blue, and it's a very intense blue spider with a gold caparus. So that would be the costume if I imagine.
Blue and gold.
Yeah,
That sounds cool.
blue and gold.
Yeah, or booster gold. Yeah.
And one thing about the spider, it's very aggressive. So that would be an interesting personality trait.
Passive aggressive, maybe.
It just had like it's an abing. It's an abing.
Yeah, exactly. Abing, right?
Oh,
So like
really?
the gold can be gold chains,
Okay, it's
because like there's no limit, honestly. Like we meet in this movie a character called Peter Parkcard, who is a car.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. So yeah, being Spider-Man, I think it makes a lot of sense as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would like that
even-
actually. Quite funny. I think
even
he will fit well with Mrs. Chen's convenience store.
even in the sequence where they're showing all the spider people surrounding Mouse, there's one that looks like a samurai, which is actually a different design from the spider that it's based on, called Peter of Arachne, the Prince of Arachne, which is a very very formal title for Peter Parker.
Mark says the
Japanese
Philippines have Gagamboy, which is like spider in Tagalog. Is Gagamba. That's interesting. A Filipino spider boy. I wonder, does Gagamboy have what kind of superpowers does he have? Maybe you can just post it and I'll just flash it up later on.
I believe Gagam Boy is a Filipino show. I believe there was a Filipino show based on this. Mark could correct me if I'm
wrong. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up now, so that people will, not think that we are rambling too much.
Wrap it up in spider silk.
Oh, well, Mark says that, there was an actual movie in 2004.
I mean, of course, there's we have to invoke Chuck Man, which is like a direct parody of Spider-Man.
There've been a lot of announcements as well because of this Spider-Verse movie. And then they've been talking about 3 things that were very interesting, which was like there's going to be a Miles Morales live action movie, probably a Spider-Woman movie, probably, and then they'll also talk about the 5th Tom Holland version of the Spider-Man movie. So there are lots of Spider-Man stuff that's probably coming up. I think I'm more interested in the Miles Morales live action movie though, because I'm wondering whether are they going to tie Donald Glover back into that as well? That would be interesting to see.
They should if they're able to. I mean, I would love for that to be in the MCU and for that version of Miles to coexist with Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker. And I think the live action Spider-Man movie, that's going to be spun off from Madame Web. which is going to star Dakota Johnson. And I think Sydney Sweeney is Julia Carpenter in it. There's a few like other Spider Women that are in that movie that is supposed to be either next year or 2025. And then we have the Craven movie that Aaron Taylor Johnson is in, where Craven loves animals or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think might happen in Beyond the Spider-Verse?
I think my sort of question is how big a role the Prowler Miles will have. Like whether or not that is just an Act 1 villain or whether he's the main villain for the whole thing. Because I
we know
feel
Spot's going to be appearing anyway, right? Because he started the whole thing about the universe changing.
I'm mostly looking forward to them bringing back the original team, which is Spider-Man Noir, Nicolas Cage, and Penny Parker, Kimiko Glenn, and Spider-Ham, who is John Mulaney, and so those characters are mostly absent from this one. Like the main returning Spider person, other than Gwen, is Peter B. Parker.
Yes.
So you're kind of like, oh, where's everybody? But then they're still there, and they show up at the end because Gwen puts together her own team. That has them together with Spider-Man India and and like the other characters. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that because when Nicolas Cage said he wasn't going to be in this, I was like kind of sad. I was like, oh,
I know, right?
Noir, I think is my favorite.
He's my favorite in the first one.
Yeah. Because of how they animated him like in a different frame rate and black and white.
I'm just hoping that it won't be too much, though. I mean, I guess if you're not a really pop culture Spider-Man fan or whatever, this movie might seem a bit much for you.
This is already too much, and I think like there are going to be a lot of 4-year-olds will be very confused.
So I just hope they don't spoil the goodwill or like the spectacular optimism that we have been having when we watched this film in the last one, and that there'll be a good, like they'll land it well and land it solidly well. So that we won't like saying like, oh my god, I went through like what 15 or what, no, it'll be next year, so six years of Spider-Verse movie, right? And then this kind of ending, please no, please.
it has to like
it has to end
it has to make people happy, and it's hard because prequels are tricky as well. We talk about sequels having their issues and prequels, but there are a lot of prequels that are my favorite movies in their respective trilogies, like Return of the Jedi and Last Crusade, and even like Back to the Future 3, unpopular opinion, but that's my favorite of the 3 Back to the Future movies. So there is an opportunity for this to be really good. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think like I do have confidence in them given how good this is and how this like I think improves on Into the Spider-Verse in every way.
Yeah, in every way.
It's just better, And I am speaking as somebody who liked but didn't love Into the Spider-Verse. I love Across the Spider-Verse, and Across the Spider-Verse is my favorite movie that I've seen this year so far. And John was like, he loved it so much he went and saw it the second time as well.
I might watch it the second time too.
Yeah, and watching it the second time, you get to see a lot of things that you miss.
I'm sure I missed a lot of
it's also
things,
the script the script. I mean, I'm saying this maybe daringly, but if the animation wasn't so good, but the script was like this, I think I would have loved it as well, because of how they build up the characters, advances their motivations and their feelings, after what happened Into the Spider-Verse, and all that, like the relationships. These are the core human feelings and importance of relationships or connection to each other. I mean, that's what matters, no matter what kind of stories you tell. They did it so well. The animation was just like the icing on the cake, and the soundtrack as well. I have to say the soundtrack, like mashed all and together into a very fluid, well-balanced story. So do watch it. Do go watch it in the theaters. Don't just watch it on your TV screens or your computer screens. Yeah, the biggest screen that you can ever find. IMAX with really wonderful sound. Just immerse yourself in 140 minutes of the Spider-Verse. I think you have to do this if you can afford it. Please, don't cheat yourself out from this experience. I think it might become your best movie of the year that you have watched in 2023. As far as I know, it's my favorite from the start till now, because of how memorable it is. Like it lives in your psyche. You know the stories and the colors and what the characters mean to you. After that, I think that's what I consider great storytelling. Like it echoes in your mind after that, and you question certain things about your existence as well. That's what's a good movie. That's what it means to me personally. I know, John, you mentioned about us privately yesterday about a special fundraiser. Do you want to share
Yes.
with the audience out there so that they could help out with this fundraiser as well?
Yeah, I would like to give a shout out to like the Peter David Fund. Peter David is the creator of Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider 2099. He's going through quite a bunch of health issues recently, and the last I know that he's going for an operation for his heart. So um, the fundraiser it's almost reaching its goal, which is really impressive. Yeah, but if you have some time, maybe you can check it out. These characters, this movie probably wouldn't be there if it weren't for him.
Yeah,
And the creators of the comics aren't always in the limelight because there's way too many of them, and sometimes it just gets lost within the marketing space. They're not as marketable as some of the big names like Stanley, so to speak. So, if you have some time, maybe some spare cash, and any little helps. And yeah,
yeah,
and you can check out his other works as well.
yeah. So I put up the link here, but I'll post that separately again in my social media in case you just want to click and contribute to his well-being. I've also heard that John mentioned that Marvel has been helping him as well. So yay, Marvel! Thanks
That's
for
that's
doing that. Yeah,
that's nice to hear because usually you always hear of the corporations like leaving their artists, leaving their creators at the wayside. So the wife has mentioned that Marvel has been actually doing a lot, using their corporate insurance to help him up as much as they can, which is
mm,
nice to hear.
yeah.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, there's like a bigger conversation. Sorry, Tina, but
Oh,
just
sure.
briefly. I
No,
mean,
go ahead. We
there's
have
like a
time.
bigger conversation about how the creators of a lot of these characters, they know that the work they make belongs to the company, so they can be given credit, but then at the same time anything that is further done with the characters,
Yeah,
they don't have
correct.
to be consulted on,
Yeah,
or they don't have to see the profits from it. So
yeah,
that is the thing that is very frustrating about like working in a corporate kind of landscape, because on the one hand there's a part of me that likes the idea of something being there for other people to build upon, but then on the other hand I also think like we need to know where it comes from, and we need to
yeah,
acknowledge where like if not for these creators, then we don't have these characters
yeah,
that then feature in these other stories.
yeah.
So like there is a bigger conversation to be had about
Of
credit
course.
and about compensation and payment,
Yeah,
and the fairness with which writers especially
yeah.
and artists are treated. Yeah.
I mean, the residuals, especially with new technology and like streaming as well, this huge conversation with the writer's strike happening in,
Yeah.
Hollywood as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this
it's
is
it's
like
not just about money,
yeah, it's
yeah.
not, yeah, it's about credit and what else you get from the work that you have done.
Yeah.
It's not it's very legalistic as well,
Creative
actually.
ownership, yeah, all
Yeah.
of that.
Anyway, it's an interesting point to wrap up, but
Yeah, there's way
yeah,
too much for us to talk about. I
too
realized that we
much.
haven't even spoke about Eddie Samberg's cameo
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
as
there's
well.
so
definitely.
many, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there is so many. Let me just for fun, since I did this, let me flash uh the characters that we kind of love on screen for a while. So
Oh
we
yeah.
have Miles. He's not a baby anymore. He's quite grown up.
Yeah.
He's
When
becoming my fast favorite. I'm beginning to have two my favorites already in this movie. And yeah,
The casting is
Miguel.
so good. They all did
Yeah,
really well. I
so
think
yeah,
there's
they
there's
all played
a
the characters.
the production refers to Spider-Man 2099 as property damage Spider-Man because of how much collateral damage the character
yeah.
causes.
And this Jessica Drew, right? Is I mean that's why I talk about diversity. They even dare to insert a pregnant superhero inside there.
Yeah, which is from the
Usually,
comics, right? When she's
yeah, but
pregnant
no,
and fighting crime in the
yeah,
comics. Yeah.
but usually it's like, women pregnant, invisible, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is my longtime favorite. He's so cute, lah.
Yeah,
Daddy.
going on with that with the
And I like
the
how
buffalo.
they tell you that like the conversation he had in the first movie where he's like, do I want kids? Like that was what influenced him to want to have a kid, was like mentoring Miles. Yeah. And then you got Spider-Punk who looks like a
Oh,
magazine
yeah,
cutout.
man.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
And this is Ben Reilly, whom we
And
didn't
then
talk about,
Riley.
but whom, John was very
So
excited to
much,
see him.
but it was
And
like
I
so.
was really happy.
Yeah, it was also like a question, right? Who was going to voice him? And then after that, they confirmed that it was
It's Andy
Adam
Samberg
Sandler.
And December.
doing a
I,
very
I,
funny, like kind of tortured 90s dark
I was so
character.
delighted.
Yeah.
I was so delighted by his portrayal of Ben Reilly.
And our wonderful villains, Spot.
Spot. Yeah.
And Spider-Man
Parvati
India.
Pavaka. Yeah.
Don't drink chai tea, yeah? Tea. Chai tea.
None bread. None
Yeah.
bread.
All right. So thanks for everyone for joining us. It has been a great an hour and almost 20 minutes, I guess. An hour and a half. We can't discuss everything about this movie. Basically, that we both three of us love it, absolutely love it so much. Please support the creators of Spider-Man, not just the movie, but the artists and the writers who have brought these characters to life for you. But you want to watch this movie, watch it as the largest, loudest, biggest theater ever, and I bet you have a very wonderful experience.
I'd love to
by
see it
yourself
in
or your
3D.
friend.
We saw it in 2D, but I'd love to see it in 3D. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no 3D version, right?
I don't know if it's released in 3D in Singapore because I know Into the Spider-Verse was in 3D. Yeah.
Mark says, great discussion, hearing you guys. Thanks for joining us,
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Much
Thanks for joining.
appreciated.
Yeah.
If not, if the three of us will be yakking with each other anyway, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah,
But
which is
anyway,
what we do without being on live stream.
thank you. Stay online while I just say something to the audiences out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Either you're listening to us post live or like Mark joining us just now for the conversation. This is a special, kind of movie review live with Red Dot Diva, which I do occasionally with my friends. For the actual live with Red Dot Diva episode where I feature a interview or chat with a Southeast Asian creator, I have invited a couple of guests and I haven't got a firm reply yet. So just look out for my social media for the actual announcement as to who will be appearing for the next live with Red Dot Diva. I'm hoping it will be a July episode on the same like last Saturday of the month. Hopefully I'll get the guest that I wish could appear, but just look out for my social media announcements as well. I'm going to bring back the two of them back on screen. And John, tell the people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on at ThoughtDust on Twitter, on Instagram. You can shoot me any questions if you want introductions to comic book, DC,
Yeah.
Marvel, or beyond. Even Image or anything.
Yeah, he
I'll-
reads
I'll-
so many comics, right? That I think
A
if
lot.
you just name one comic and one character, he will know about it. Or you could ask him to recommend you something as well.
Yep.
Jedd, let's flash it down below. Woo.
Yeah, most places I am a Jedi, as you see down here, or Jedi the movie guy. I am Jedi the movie guy on Letterboxd, and that is my movie review Instagram account as well. So I write movie reviews and make custom action figures,
Yeah.
and I complain about not being able to attend previous and not being able to do interviews. So that is the main content you can expect from me. It's those things.
Yeah, but read his comic, his movie reviews. I mean, they are great, and he brings other perspectives into the movie review that he does. I really respect Jedd for you doing that. There are
Thank
not
you.
many
Thank you
people
so
who.
much, Tina.
I think a lot of the movie reviews I've read, the local ones at least, either too snarky or they're just like normal. They don't really bring much to the table, and I know that you always try to insert some behind the scenes kind of facts into your review, which I learned quite a lot from that as well. Because I'm very bad at trivia, as I always tell
Oh,
people.
thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate anyone reading. I mean, because right now the movie reviews that I write, it's all for free. I used to be
Yeah.
paid to write movie reviews, but I'm not anymore. But I love it, and I want to stay in that space. I hope that I
Yeah.
will have a chance to do this in more of a professional capacity again. But yeah, times are not so good for
Yeah.
this industry.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are
And,
not. They are
I mean,
looking at. Yep. Continue, please, Jedd.
Oh yeah, before we say goodbye, I mean, I just want to say about John that one thing I really really like about him, as a friend as well, is that he loves all of this stuff, but he never gets worked up about anything. Like we
Chill.
think of all of these angry nerds, who
Yeah.
get into fights on Twitter
Right.
and
Exactly.
Facebook and get upset and sort of seethe, and they're like, oh, this wasn't like the thing in the 1980s, and like John watches everything and reads everything and can tell you, will give his opinion and his analysis, but he doesn't get mad and
Yeah,
pick
I
a fight
know.
and things like that. So I like that energy very
Yeah, I
much. I
like
think
that
that's
too.
very rare.
Ah, thanks. Thanks
Yeah.
for
You're
saying
welcome.
that. That's very nice to know.
I tell everyone that about you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, this life with Red Dot Diva is basically a space that we try to support each other. I know, Jedd, it's been difficult, and even though I'm doing as an indie, things have been really, very hard to come by as well. Opportunities to interview people, and that's not just like the companies or whatever that they are cutting me off from a particular list of invitees, but it could be because they have, as these companies are acquiring each other as well, with Discovery acquiring WB, and therefore HBO is part of the whole entire thing. So they are getting smaller and more pulled into one, just like one
Consolidated,
place, a
yeah. So
consolidated
then
thing,
the
and they were
relationships you form with people
yeah,
kind of like
the
dissolve.
relationships
Yeah.
have gone, they have left the company, and then um, people are also looking at very broad-based metrics on social media, where of course if you're a small little blogger who does that for just like her passion or a hobby, it's not going to get you much anywhere.
Yeah.
But then again, I do believe in making your space and your stand wherever you can, and wherever you I mean, like, you can afford to, because there's
Holding on
time
to it with my 2
and
minutes.
money, right? Right. And I think that for those who are have wandered by my way either recently or my longtime friends, I thank you for your support, and for the audiences as well. I think those are the more meaningful parts of doing what I've been doing, and I hope that you'll continue to watch our live with Red Dot Diva with whichever guest I invite, and as well as support the endeavors of Jedd, and maybe get to know John better. And I think this is how we form the community and the bond, and that will hold on faster and longer than being the best popular outlet for the day, I say a social media outlet for the day. That will probably last throughout the ages as well, and the internet never forgets. So this will be on there, till probably forever and ever. And maybe that's how we make our, we have a longevity, eternal life via social media. And thanks everyone again. Thank you, John, and thank you, Jedd, for this an
Yeah.
hour and a half or so. Much appreciated. And maybe we'll get back together when we watch The Flash, maybe. Who knows? Might be an interesting one to talk about.
That'll
And
be the next big
yeah, the next big one.
one.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you again for
Thank
the
you.
next
Thank you,
live
Tina.
read.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.